adjustments to your scope as you're messing around on your bench with it becomes important, and that's the memory depth. And that equation that keep in mind is measurement duration is equal to memory depth divided by the sampling frequency. Deeper memory enables a higher sampling rate. However, the larger memory will increase the update interval, and that, of course, will cause the scope to slow down. Now, on my scope, I can select either the full or different levels, I believe. It's been a while since I've looked into that. Another issue to bear in mind is if the signal is to display realistically, the sample rate should exceed the signal's highest frequency component. This Nyquist rate is the lower limit for signal sampling that will not be subject to aliasing. And to create a meaningful display, digital scope must connect the dots. And this amounts to interpolating along the sampled points, which is a complex mathematical process that consumes a finite amount of time. The larger memory depth will create a greater number of data points, and this tendency can limit the effectiveness of the scope with respect to, when you're testing on your bench. Really, the bottom line here is that bigger is not always better when it comes to memory depth. But again, it comes down to knowing your instrument and what you're measuring and all that kind of good stuff. So that's just really a quick overview that I had. I wanted as an introduction to the ones that are not quite so familiar with their scopes. And further reading will be needed, of course, especially in order to understand how these different variables come into play when you're using, when you're working on a project and you're on your bench. And you want to be able to, if you're making an error, you want to know that you're making an error. You don't want to be measuring something and think it's right and it's not. So I don't know if anybody has any comments or questions on that.
Yeah, I got a comment.
Fire away.
So you're right that you need about 5 samples per hertz roughly for good quality signal fidelity, but your scope should have a filter in there, an anti-aliasing filter. So it'll be a 200 megahertz scope should have a 200 megahertz filter roughly. So it'll automatically filter out anything high frequency. So you shouldn't have to worry about that.
Shouldn't.
By design. Second thing is that your 100 megahertz scope can be probably factory unlocked to make it a 200 megahertz scope. So you don't have to pay for the extra bandwidth.
Yeah, it can. And basically it's a 100 megahertz scope because it's software locked.
Yeah.
And of course, by the time I got up enough nerve to unlock it, try and Google it, and do you think you can find somebody that tells you how to do it? Now, I think somebody locally here has done it, and I could probably go over there and find out how he did it and get it and open it up. Now, same thing with my spectrum analyzer. I could open up that as well and have the extra functionality that's locked out at the moment, and also up to the higher frequency range. The only thing is, if I bugger up my scope, that's a couple $100. If I bugger up my spectrum analyzer, that's a whole different animal altogether. So anyway, okay, thank you, Hassan. Ken.
Yeah, the only problem with cracking those things, if you do it wrong, you'll brick the thing.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I'm not so sure I want to do it to my SA. I might be willing to take the chance on the scope, because if I brick that thing, I'm not, I'll spend more of the kid's inheritance. That's all.
What inheritance?
Pardon me?
What inheritance?
I'm doing my best. Who's that? Oh, Hassan, go ahead.
Yeah, the scope is your inheritance for your kids. One point is that there's 5. So for digital signals, you want to capture all the harmonics. So again, you need another 5x thing there. So if you have a 200 megahertz scope, you probably want to capture, or actually if you have a 100 megahertz scope, you probably want to get 20 megahertz digital signals at the highest, because you want to get the 5th harmonic. However, for RF signals, which are band limited, that doesn't apply. So you can go anywhere up to the max of your scope, because RF signals are already band limited and properly filtered. They're just sine waves, basically, in the narrow band. So that just keep in mind.
Yeah, as long as you're right, because it's not necessarily. I mean, it's supposedly a pure sine wave, but it's not likely to be that pure. But okay, Dave, go ahead. Your mic is still muted, Dave.
Yeah, I don't know if I believe that. When was the last time you saw a pure, like even the signals we're measuring, Peter, on our SA,
Oh,
we've got a signal. You're seeing harmonics, so
no,
it's
you're right. There is no such thing as a pure sine wave. Yeah.
there's no such thing as a pure sine wave. So I think I would add to what Hassan's saying and say that the harmonics for an RF signal are probably low, and the energy that they're going to contribute to the overall signal you see is going to be small.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yes, it does to me. Yeah.
So in the end, he's right. It doesn't matter because we're looking at harmonics which are really small.
Right.
Right. So it doesn't really, you saw from that chart, it's probably like 0.5% or 1% error, you know?
Well, right, because even if your scope captures up to the fifth harmonic, you're up to about 96%. You've captured 96% of the energy.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess the caveat is, in general, your radio should filter out all the out of band harmonics, and so you'll only see, and your signal will only be band limited to a narrow band. And as long as your scope can capture that, that's fine. If you're interested in looking at the out of band harmonics energy, that's a different story. But you probably shouldn't use a scope for that because scopes have limited resolution, like 1 millivolts or 2 millivolts or something.
Right.
You should use a spectrum analyzer.
And you're right, because that was a problem we got into many years ago when having a scope, and all of a sudden we wanted to start measuring really small signal levels, and that's when I started to get interested in active probes. And I tried to homebrew an active probe, but I wanted one that would do 1 to 30 megahertz all in one fell swoop. But that was pretty hard to design. So I've since thought, well, we'll think that out and divide it into one that'll go 1 to 15 and 15 to 30. But then again, there's 5 other things on the list right now to do. So, but one day I'll come back to it. Michael, you had a comment?
So I have the signaling 100 megahertz scope, same one you do, more or less. Is what you're really saying here that if all I really want to do is look at things like the LBS is producing that kind of RF stuff, and I'm not really interested in digital things where high speed really matters, my scope's adequate, I think. Is that what the message is here?
Yeah, I think where you might run into trouble is if you're starting to try to measure the really, really low signal levels, then that's where, like I was just mentioned a minute ago, that's when you're going to start thinking about, oh, well, should I pick up an active probe or spend the kid's inheritance and get a spectrum analyzer? But there's some pretty cheaper alternatives out there now these days coming up. Dave, you have a comment?
Oh, one other thing.
Oh, sorry, Michael, go ahead.
One other thing, you mentioned a chart. And that somebody mentioned a chart where I must have missed that, and I also missed the notes that are being talked about here that you had or something.
Yeah, I didn't publish any notes. I just wrote down a few things, speaking points here. But no, Dave, in Dave's last posting on Groups.io, that the chart that he's referring to that he and Hassan had done is in there in that
okay.
Message.
I'll go look for it. Thanks.
Okay.
Well, it's to correct it. It's the chart I did, but Hassan corrected. So let's make sure we get that clear. No, I was going to say, Michael, your scope has an FFT, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so that 5 times limit is going to impact your FFT, because if you're going to look at if you got a 100 megahertz scope and you're looking at a 50 megahertz signal, you're only going to see one harmonic. And that's even if the scope doesn't start rolling off, because I think the 3 dB point is 100 megahertz, right?
Yeah.
So that harmonic, that peak you're going to see at 100 megahertz is going to be 3 dB down.
Yeah. So as long as I'm looking at signal that's less than 20 megs, I'm okay.
For an FFT, you'll see the first 3 or 4 harmonics, and it's going to be nice. But beyond that, the roll off of the bandwidth of the scope starts attenuating all those signals.
Yeah. Okay. I understand. Got it.
That's good. Okay. Any other comments, queries?
Quick comment.
Sure.
You can also use an SDR as a poor man's oscilloscope spectrum analyzer. The only difference is that a spectrum analyzer will show you like 0 to 10 gigahertz or whatever it is in one fell swoop, whereas this an SDR you have to manually kind of scan the bands. But an SDR should be as sensitive or more than a spectrum analyzer, so you could use it to look at the harmonics if you felt like it.
Yeah, I started to work on a spectrum analyzer, if you will, for lack of a better word, but that kind of thing with my Hack RF and GNU radio, and I'd spent a little bit of time on it, but not too much, and it works. But how well it works, I never got around to determining that. But there's some possibilities there for sure. Somebody just asked to speak. I can't remember. Oh, Dave, you wanted to say something? Mute your mic or unmute it.
Christ, I keep forgetting that. Yeah, the SA is a good choice. However, the problem you have is spurs, because once you have an SA, you get all those from your bench. You've got your LBS open. It's got tons of RF coming out, and what are we talking about? The thing Hassan was talking about Wednesday night, 8 o'clock. Sorry.
SDR.
Harmonics?
Yeah, SDR. Sorry, I was confusing. I was thinking SA. What's the next acronym? SDR. Yes, the SDR will pick up spurs, and so it could be misleading. Because I used SDR for years as my SA, and every time I looked at a signal, I would have all these birdies and spurs and everything all over the place, and I had a dickens of a time trying to figure out which was real and which was ambient crap.
Well, you did a lot of work when you blew up your SA. You did an awful lot of. Well, your only choice was the FFT function on your scope. And you got to be pretty handy on that. One day you should give us a little practical demo, Dave, next year.
Yeah, the scope. Keep in mind the scope is shielded, and as long as you've got, I guess the probe collects stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem with an SA. You've got coax cable connected directly to your gazouts.
Yeah.
And so you're getting a pretty clean signal coming out. You don't get a lot of ambient crap, right?
No, true enough. But there's an FFT function in a lot of these scopes, and it might be a nice little demo just because somebody who doesn't have an SA maybe can make do with the FFT function on their scope.
So it's coming back to that comment you made, Peter, and you're not the only one that made that comment. I think the guys from chat with the designers said it. Know your instrument.
Oh, yeah.
So if you know the limitations of a SDR, there's no reason why you can't use it.
Exactly. Hassan?
Yeah, so on that note, I mean, I did a bit of research on FFTs on scopes before I bought mine. So it turns out the devil's in the details. So a lot of scopes will have an FFT, but what they do is it's no better than it's just like a cartoon. It's not very accurate. It's not as good as a real spectrum analyzer's FFT. The reason is they're digitizing at 1 gig sample per second, which is fine, but they don't do the FFT on the raw data stream. What they do is they kind of downsample and display the points on the screen, and then the FFT is done just on the stuff that's on the screen, which is much less resolution, much less accurate. And the reason is probably because the FPGA guys didn't want to do the feature, and the marketing just told the GUI guys to do it, and they just did it. They just kind of rushed it into production. So it's just a gimmick. It's not a really precision instrument. So you get what you pay for. So if you want a good FFT, you may have to buy a really expensive scope.
Yeah. If we ever get around to having in-person meetings again, it might be one night to do where you set up a test signal source, and then with noise and et cetera on it, and then put a scope to it, put an FFT function on it, and then an SA, and just see the differences. Okay.
Actually, check my videos out where I compared the FFT to the SA. I thought it was pretty close. It's within a couple of dB. I was making measurements.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Let me make a note. What video number?
I can't remember. Look at the ones where I blew up my essay, and I
Okay.
started using the scope. You'll see I did comparisons, and it was actually, it's not. I agree with Hassan. If you want precision, forget it, or accuracy, forget it. But it's a good ballpark.
Yeah, so the Siglent FFT is really good. They have 1,000,000 points. But again, the key thing is waveforms per second. So when the scope is digitizing a signal, it's not showing every single data points. Scopes do a trigger. So they trigger on like a pulse or something. They show whatever they can show, and then they kind of reset. And then they'll lose a bunch of samples. Then they'll start again, wait for a trigger, and do that. So they only show about 100,000 waveforms per second. And in cheap scopes, it's like 4,000 waveforms per second. So they're basically throwing away 1 out of 100 waveforms. Like if you have a continuous sine wave, they'll show you 1 out of 100 of those, and then they do the FFT on that. So for a stationary signal, it's fine. But if you want to actually characterize your radio, you may need to use the real spectrum analyzer, which does it at full speed.
All right.
Something to think about.
Okay. Ken, you had a comment.
Yeah, but we're not really worried about how much accuracy you got, because typically when what you're doing is you're feeding a signal generator into the front end, and you're measuring signals down the chain. So everything's going to be relative to that signal coming in. We're going to be close enough.
No, you're right, and that's very true. But the conversation really is like, going back to the know your instrument, and if you know what the errors are or where your errors could be, then I think it's important. At least that you know what you're measuring and what the problems could be with that measurement. And we're talking about probably small numbers anyways in a lot of these cases.
Yeah, like I looked at the FFT on my scope, and I hooked a wire up, and I saw this 5 gigahertz signal. So I was like, oh, well, yeah, it can detect my Wi-Fi router. And then I'm playing around, I'm turning it off and stuff, and I realized it's exactly 5 gigahertz, and it's a 5 gigasample scope. So I realized it was a spur of some kind, some signal processing artifact that just showed up in the spectrum. But that was just it was a gotcha there. So things like that happen.
Good. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Great. Okay. I know, I think a couple of guys here tonight got a little bit of a show and tell here. I guess Hassan, you bought a new toy there you wanted to show us?
Yes. So this thing just arrived today in the mail first. I got this book. And along with that, I decided to get this one too, because I got tired of guessing what to do with the grounds and stuff.
Oh, so right now we're guessing because all we see is a black screen from you.
What? Really? Okay. We've got my video quality down a bit.
Yeah, turn your lights on.
How about now?
Nope.
Hang on. Let me.
You got your camera turned off?
Camera's on. I can see my video here. I guess the connection quality isn't really good.
I'm showing that you have a connection. The connection is lost. I don't know. Maybe come out and come back in again.
All right. Do that.
Or turn down your resolution.
I think you did that. But I think once you've lost a connection, it can be tough to get it back, and it's easier just to come in and back out. That's what that's why Marty keeps coming in and out all the time.
Hey, Peter, fellow Jitster's got his hands up.
Who does?
Fellow Jitster.
I don't know who that is.
Who's the fellow Jitster? Can't tell. Lost connection. I wonder if that's no. Or if that's Hussein.
I wonder.
Is that me, NZ2Z from down below?
There you go. Okay, we didn't see your name there.
Well, I gotta find out how to put my name down here.
There's 3 little dots in the far right, lower right-hand corner of your screen called More Actions.
Okay.
Click on that, then go up to Settings, and then in Settings, Profile.
Okay.
Great.
I'm gonna do it.
Grand. Okay, Hassan, I see you're back. Don't see any video yet. Although I've got a new icon for you. It says inactive. Well, maybe while Hassan's doing that, does who? Ian, did you have something to show for tonight? I saw you working away on something on your bench. What was that? I can hardly hear your audio.
It's not really radio related, but it's kind of cool. So at the museum I volunteer at, we inherited all the historical TTC streetcar fleet, and I've been getting the parts from them. So with the
So you're
parts,
building a streetcar in your living room?
I got test equipment.
Oh, geez.
This is testing these umbilical cables that you use when you're towing a car, so you can communicate with the dead car and operate its electric track brakes. So,
Wow. Those cables remind me of a GE radio that I used to have for 6 meters that came from Ontario Hydro.
they're huge. I got that, and then little HP power supply. I fixed that the other day. Help me keep these silly cars running.
There's a guy in the club named Dave Duke.
Taking all the Toronto streetcars and moving them to Guelph?
Yeah, they're no. Got 10 of them at the moment. I'm the only guy that keeps them running. Each of them has a computer, 27 cards, and it's all like built, designed in the 60s. It's all TTL logic and whatnot.
Oh, that'll keep you out of trouble.
It keeps me busy trying to keep the suckers working. They like to die.
Good.
But I need all this test gear I can get. A
That's
13
fine.
manual on it.
Jeez. That's a big cable. Hassan, you had a comment or are you back?
Yeah, there's a guy in the club. I think his name is Dave Duke, but he works at the TTC doing maintenance on some of their stuff.
Yeah, Dave, DTX, or
Yeah, his email address is Dave Duke, but yeah, I think he might know something about this stuff.
oh, I'm sure he does. His job is in the communications lab. But anyway, I haven't talked to him for years.
Hmm.
He hasn't been around for a long time too.
I guess your audio, your video still not working, Hassan?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. I can see it from my end, but for some reason it's not showing it.
Yeah, it's showing actually every once in a while the no video feed icon is flashing here.
Great. This
Anyway.
is my desk. It should have been. It's on an Ethernet connection too, so I don't know what's going on.
Does anybody else have anything else to show off? How about Mr. Hack RF over there in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen? That's you, Kevin.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't get it working. I was trying to get it wasn't finding the Hack RF, so I got to install the right driver, I guess. Some people are saying you got to put the Zadig driver in, but other people are saying no. So
now that you've mentioned it, that kind of rings a bell.
Oh, does it?
Yeah. As soon as you said
okay.
I think,
It was kind of like the RTL driver or the RTL STR, right? We had to put that Zadig driver in for HDR Sharp or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I mean, with the laptop and then the tower here and back and forth, I'm starting to forget what I'm doing. Well, I probably would forget even if I just had the one computer, but when you got two of them and you're doing different things with each one, it's...
Yeah, I know. Exactly. It gets confusing, to say the least.
Yeah.
So anyway, all this bloody high-tech stuff. But anyway, no, I was just trying here while you guys were talking about the scopes and the amplitude and the bandwidth and stuff, because it's got a little signal generator on it. So I just, set the frequency to 50 megahertz, 100 megahertz, 200 megahertz, thinking that the output from the Hack RF might be sort of constant. But I mean, at 50, it was what I have. It was like I was seeing 900 millivolts on the scope, and at 100, it was 610 millivolts. And at 200, it was 390 millivolts. So either my scope is really, really crappy and it starts rolling off way earlier than 200 megs, or the hack RF signal output is nowhere near a constant value. So anyway, for whatever that's worth.
You have 50 ohms input on the scope, or is it 1 meg?
Yeah, I had a 50 ohm terminator. I had a T connection with a 50 ohm terminator, and then just a coax connection to the SDR.
Well, Mr. Hack RF is one of Dave's buddies. I'm sure Dave could find out for you.
No, I expected it would be somewhat,
probably a
constant
combination
or consistent over a 4-to-1 frequency range, but I'm sure the scope was rolling off a bit, but it was a lot more than I thought, right? I mean, it was half. Well, it went down. Oh yeah, almost a third, from 50 to 200 megs.
Did you have the VNA?
No, I don't.
You didn't pick up VNA? Yeah, because you almost need a second instrument to measure as well, just to confirm what the other one's doing.
Yeah, well, what I was going to try and do is my rig expert antenna analyzer and just see what that is. I'd never really looked at it, but it'd be interesting to try that.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay.
Got a lot of signal sources, but not one of them's calibrated, so I don't really know.
You want to get it working because you want to play around with that. What do you call it? Porta pack?
Yeah, the porta pack part of it. So anyway, it's like,
keep in mind for a few $100s for that hack RF, for it to be completely broadband and constant across the board,
it won't be.
I know. I just thought it might be better, but by the same token, this is not the few $100 version. This is the the Southern Asian version. That's even a little bit less than that. So
the $80 version that comes with 3 adapters, set of cables, battery charger.
Yeah, exactly.
They found the radio.
Hey, Kevin, if you want a calibrated source, let me know, because I bought a proper signal. What's a signal? They didn't call it a signal generator. What would they call it? Not a signal source.
But it's a constant source at a given frequency and voltage, right?
It's calibrated. You go in there and you punch it in. I paid a lot of money for it. You go and you punch in the frequency, you punch in the output voltage or the output amplitude.
Is that the one you got from Elecraft?
No, that's the one I got from what's the guy, Jason at Signalant. Remember last time we were down, I bought that signal source.
You bought a signal.
Oh, okay.
You bought the signal generator.
Well, I don't think it's called a signal generator. I call it a signal generator.
It's a calibrated source.
It's a calibrated source.
A signal generator that he's fancied up the name for.
Yeah, it's not a precision source, but I measured it and it's pretty bang on.
Okay.
And you could choose different modulations. You could set up modulations, all kinds of stuff. You could combine signals together in it. So if you want to borrow it, I'm not going to get to using that for several months. So if you want to borrow it because you're experimenting with stuff, let me know.
Okay, thanks. Because one other thing I was thinking of with the Hack RF and GNU radio, you could set it up if, providing you had somewhat of a constant output, is, this thing with the harmonics and the scope and everything. It was like, okay, you could set up a signal source as a square wave and then put various filters in there and change the output characteristics of the waveform and then see how the scope responds. You know what I mean? Like you could put in the 3rd harmonic, the 5th harmonic, or whatever. You could do it in GNU radio and create the waveform. But anyway, just.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
That's what I was actually going to try and do and whip it up. But it's like, well, I can't even see the Hack RF, so we'll just stop there. But anyway, Hassan, you're back.
Yeah, I switched browsers.
Well, there we go.
So this is Chrome.
You need a haircut.
I haven't had one since January. I'm going for the mullets now.
Speaking of hair, if you were on the meeting last night, has anybody seen Joe lately?
Joe Kingpin.
Joe, his hair is down to his shoulders.
I think he always had that, didn't he?
That's because he was preparing to go to Portugal.
Okay. So what toy did you pick up? What came in the mailbox today?
So this is one book.
Oh, okay.
This is the second one.
Oh my goodness, all this bedside reading you got going.
Yeah. So then this is the Hack RF. So, sorry, not the Hack RF, the Blade RF. So it's got 2 TX, 2 RX. It's got pretty decent specs. And this is the Ham It Up converter. So the Blade RF goes from 70 megahertz upwards to 6 gigahertz. And this thing goes from 0.1 to 60 megahertz. So between the two of them, I can actually receive just about anything. So with the Blade RF, it works pretty well. I started off listening to CBC radio, and that was fine. Then I did some, air traffic. Pearson is nearby my house, so. And then I hooked up an ADS-B receiver, so it actually can detect airplane GPSs and stuff. And it's pretty neat. It works pretty well. And with this thing now, I got this today. So in between meetings at work, I was looking at the HF bands. So the AM radio receiver works pretty well. I can see the entire AM band and just select a station. And then I looked at some of the ham bands, but there was no traffic on them, so I couldn't really zoom in much. I'm going to play around with it a bit more. I was hoping someone can broadcast and I can see if someone can start to transmit. Maybe I can receive them on my end here, because I've got it hooked up to an external antenna.
You mean you want somebody from the Homebrew Club to actually push the talk on their microphones on the rigs?
Yes.
Wow, what a concept! It's funny, that was something I was going to talk about tonight if we had a lull here, but
field testing.
What's this microphone? What is this microphone?
I don't know, because I don't have one actually hooked up anywhere. I've got a bunch of radios, none of them are in working condition. So now I can receive, but I don't even have a transmitter yet.
So somebody there got a 40 meter band or something there that you can send a signal over to Hassan's house?
I'll blow his front end.
Well, if you guys are going to transmit, just let me know. I got to plug in the antenna because I got the cable going through the patio door and it's closed right now. Are we
Okay.
Okay.
No, okay. So, well, we'll leave it to you. Why don't you do a posting on the groups IO, Hassan, asking somebody, or even on the park one, and see if somebody can, you can set up a schedule with somebody to do some transmissions for you.
Okay, that'd be great.
I can do something here, no problem, but we're going to be probably hit and miss on a signal, really. But you never know.
Yeah, I'm about 1 kilometer away from the repeater on top of the Holland Christian Homes, right by the library. So I was thinking if I can just talk to that at 433 megahertz or 443 megahertz.
Oh, I thought you wanted HF. You're thinking of VHF?
Well, it's just that happens to be so close by. I figured I'll try to get that first, and then I'll get the HF stuff. But I'm almost thinking now I should just buy a proper HF rig, because I don't want to have these project radios that are in unworking state. I might as well just get something.
Yeah, I know you want to speak there, Ken. But you know what, Hassan, you're probably right in one way. Get the real radio, but you know what? You'll still have the project radios off to the side because of the curiosity and the need to know and the satisfaction you get from building something. But when you turn your back to that side of the bench where the project stuff is, and you go over to the other side here where I don't want to say the real stuff, but the stuff to operate from. Okay, Ken, you have a comment?
Hey, Peter Taylor, didn't you post something today about a new group?
I did. There's a new group.
Yeah, there's a new group that's basically on
Special
operating.
interest group.
Apparently, there's a whole lot of guys who want to do some operating, so that might be right up. You might be getting blasted with some RF before you realize it there, Hassan.
So if
we had like 14 or 15 people join the group today. So I think there's some interest.
Well, that's good. That'll be off the good. It's like I mentioned last night. We found it was very successful here in Kingston when we selected a Monday night, and we've been doing it for a couple of years now, and it's worked out really, really well because we used the repeater when we were exploring new modes, especially the digital modes. That's when we coordinate a lot on the repeater until we all get a feel for what what to do, what not to do, that kind of thing before we unleash ourselves onto the unsuspecting ham world. But like I say, we've been doing that for a good couple of years now. And actually, this past Monday, we actually went to sideband. We actually I had to disconnect the digital stuff and plug in my microphone. What a concept! And we did a little bit of 6-meter sideband. And what else is going on? Anyway,
see, if you don't plug your digital stuff in, then your microphone is always plugged in.
Yeah, I know. Well, it kind of brings me. One of the things I was going to talk about tonight was actually doing some operating. And when we started doing some of the digital modes before, I thought, FT8, FT4, all that stuff I thought it'd be kind of boring. But I have to say that in the last few months, kind of a challenge was put in front of me about working all states and on FT8. So I started to do that, and then the interest started to grow, and then I started to do all provinces. And before long, it was doing 30 meters and then spreading out to 40 meters. And then all of a sudden, all the different countries are coming into play. So now it's become a real challenge. And FT8 isn't quite so boring as I thought it was going to be. Anyway, it also gave me something to do when I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And the other morning, I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I came down and of course, here was Fiji, Australia, New Zealand, and all these places that you don't necessarily see all that often in our waking hours. So it took me a couple of days, but I got those guys. And so now working all states has now gone to, I won't say work all countries, but we're on our way. And but the other thing that's been interesting about doing all this stuff now is PSK Reporter. That's a pretty darn good system they got going there, because now I can go and I can see how my antennas are working. And one of the things I did was, because I was having a lot of trouble getting into Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maine, and all that whole eastern seaboard. So I went out and I swung my antenna around, one leg, like 90 degrees to the way it used to be, and all that kind of stuff to mess around with the radiation patterns. Wasn't too successful in doing that. But it gave me an idea anyways to try. I guess the solution on that one is to actually raise it up higher. Same thing with my vertical, although I probably will wait till February before I climb the tower and either raise it up 5 feet or lower it a couple of feet, just to see if I can change the angle for that first hop. But anyway, that's what's nice about PSK Reporter. You can see exactly how well your antenna is performing, and if you make changes, what did you do, or how does it respond? And the other thing I found was with some of this stuff, working with WSJT. Somebody told me about JT Alert, which is great because it tells you, especially like if you're looking for working in all states, instantly it tells you where this guy is located. You'll hover your mouse over, it'll tell you what country. Well, mind you, on the FT8 software, it does that anyways. So, and then working it with AC Log, with Logbook of the World, everything's confirmed. Well, a lot of people are on Logbook of the World now, so you're getting confirmations right for the most part on everything virtually. So that's worked out quite well. And just wondering, anybody else doing any operating, or are we all building?
All working.
All working.
I'm working the band. Peter,
I just started playing with FT8, and before the call started, I was just scanning the bands, and if you go on 40 meters, it's like, oh, it's dead, and then you hook up the FT8, and there's 20 stations calling CQ, so it's pretty remarkable, really. I was talking to a contester who was like, oh, FT8, that's stupid. All you're doing is, exchanging call signs and signal reports, and like, right. And when you do CQWW,
yeah. But you know,
All right, call sign and signal report. Right.
if you want to do a little bit more than just what FTA is offering, because you could type in a little very short messages in the box there to send, and then of course on WSJT software you have the ability through JT Alert. If the other guy is online, you can send him a text message that goes via the internet. So you can kind of communicate back and forth there. I had one guy he sent me a message and said, "Can you increase your power?" But the other thing you can do is, and I haven't played too much with it, but I have done some. It's called JSA Call, and that's basically the same engine as WSJT. Little, not quite as good down into the noise floor, but just about. And it has the ability. It's got a much larger text box for you to type in your messages and whatnot. So that might be another option you can explore there. JSA Call.
I was looking at Grid Tracker too, which is kind of neat. I don't know if you played with that, but you run that and do some settings to hook it up to WJST, and then as you're working the stations, it shows a map.
Okay.
And shows the grid you're working and the line, and tells you how many kilometers it is. And then if you want to hook it up to the what's the QRZ database?
Yeah.
It'll pop up the person's information from the QRZ database. And if they've gone the whole 9 yards and they're registered with QRZ, you can see a picture of their shack and a picture of them. It was kind of funny. It was kind of cute.
Linking all this stuff now that I've gone some of this software stuff, and now AC Log as well. Now it's almost like I may end up having to pay for a subscription to QRZ. But anyway, more kids' inheritance, that's for sure. And the next one is, it's actually just cropped up over the last 24 hours here, is Meteor Scatter. So, and we've all got the software. If you're using WSJT, then you can do the Meteor Scatter as well, because it's got that mode in there also. So apparently it's quite common about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, somewhere around that time. That almost every day these guys are doing it. There's with the Meteor Scatter, there's a guy out on the East Coast in Newfoundland, I think it is, to talk to a guy locally here on Wolf Island. So that might be something. Next time I wake up early, I think I'll give that a shot. Ken, you got something to say?
You at 5 o'clock in the morning, you should be working on some bandpass filters.
I did. There it is, right there. Next problem. I think somebody else.
Question.
Yeah.
Does Hassan's SDR decode digital modes?
Does what? Sorry.
Does Hassan's SDR decode digital modes? If he's looking for some signals to listen to.
Yeah, I'm looking for something. I'm using all these different SDR programs, trying to see which one works the best. But I think the programs will decode it. Which signals are you? I was actually looking for signals of interest to poke around with.
Well, I mean, each of the different modes has their kind of preferred signal, so you have to kind of look it up. If you download WJSTX, if you select the mode, it pops up in a window. Select the mode to band, tells the frequency. So I don't even know the frequency. I just let the computer tell me. So I'm on 40 meters. So I put in 40 meters FT8, and it says right on the screen 7074. So I just dial in 7074 on my radio, and I always unplug the mic connection just to listen to what's there. And it's funny, you could barely hear the FT8 signal. It's just kind of like very, very low. But when you hook it up to your computer, boom, all these stations come up.
Which program is that again?
It's I always get the order wrong. WSJT -X is the current, is the new version.
Okay.
WSJT-X.
Oh, awesome.
If you download that software, and Peter, you should, if you haven't done so, download JT Alert.
JT Alert. Okay, I will.
And what you do is you'll fire up WSJT first, then you'll fire up JT Alert after that.
Okay.
And when you get this stuff talking to each other, you won't go back.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
I also worked all of field day on PSK.
I haven't done PSK in a long time.
I was surprised how many people were, like, it was busy. I worked pileups. Like, I've never been on the receiving end of a pileup, but
In a long time for sure.
yeah.
Michael, you got a comment?
Yeah, from what little I know of, well, I use, I've done a little bit of FT8 with JT Alert, and you can set it up so JT Alert calls for you WSJTX. So you just have to start the one, and the other one comes up automatically.
Okay,
that's worth.
Yeah.
And you can integrate it with your log. I've got it integrated with log for OM.
Yeah, once I abandoned my old radio because I wanted cat control to KX3, it wasn't long before the benefits of JT Alert came along and hooked that up, and then well, maybe I better get a logbook here, and because the logbook integrates directly into JT Alert, which then integrates up into the logbook of the world. And once I did all that, boy, oh boy, it's a slippery slope once you start the computer software stuff with your radios.
So basically, you turn the power on and you walk away for the day.
Well, no, but what I say about FT8 is it is a mode that you can play with. You can do your thing and then turn your head and go and do something on the bench for a couple minutes, and then turn your head and take a look back. Before I forget, Hassan, another program you want to try with your SDR boards there is SDR console, and SDR Sharp would be another one as well. I use SDR console a lot with the Hack RF.
I'll look at that. SDR Sharp doesn't seem to work with this model of my hardware.
Okay, try SDR console.
Okay, I'll do that.
Peter, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I start to understand why you see these pictures of people's shacks with like 3 or 4 monitors running, because they got all these different programs all running at the same time.
I know.
My screen is getting full.
I'm feeling a little lack. Actually, my young lad came into my shack the other day and saw the monitor I'm using, and he laughed at me.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, it was free," But exactly. I have to say, some of these screens that I'm seeing that these guys are doing, especially with the big world clock on there and all that, I don't know. I'll get a kink in my neck for sure if I have monitors all over the place.
Yeah. I had my antique Mac that that was a 2008 iMac up on my desk there that I can't quite bring myself to park. And when I was running field day, I put a clock up on it.
I feel the same way about my my Heathkit vacuum tube voltmeter there in the corner. It was the very first kit that I ever built when I was 16. So it's the only thing I got left of my youth. Somebody had their hand up, but I didn't see who it was. Oh, Dave.
Yeah, just a couple comments. If you're going to be running multiple programs, like Hack RF, some kind of program to decode the signal or interface to it, and then you got JT65 or whatever, you're going to have audio cables. So what I found, there's something called VAC, virtual audio cables, and it allows you to patch. So you create a virtual port. So it patches from one audio source to another audio source. And I use that. I used to use that quite a bit. As JT Alert, Peter, I use that quite a bit. It got annoying.
Why?
It just got annoying because I'd be trying to work, and it would always, because I had the voice. You get.
I don't have. I have that disabled. No, I don't.
It was always going off, and it was too busy. I use HRD.
Turn the volume down.
Yeah, I use HRD, and I never look back. That has got everything. You pay for it. I think it's $60 or $70. You pay for it, and you get a year subscription to it, and it's got everything.
Yeah,
it's got logbook. It's got a digital decoder. It's got a tuner. It's got cat. It's got a spotter. It's got all the spots like PSK, whatever. And you just pick out, you say you're working, you're chasing a certification or, whatever. It pops up. It says, here's one you need to get. You click on it, tunes the radio, tunes the mode, and it does everything except push the mic.
The problem I found with HRD is I downloaded it and I tried it, had big problems with it. Long story short, tech support from HRD, even though I was not a paid subscriber yet, or at least I thought I was going to be, was fantastic. No complaints. We emailed a couple of times, and then they said, right, we'll schedule a meet, which was about 2 days away, and they logged into my computer and fixed it up, and away we went. A couple of days later, I was still having problems. Big problems trying to get it to interface to Logbook of the World. Then they said, well, your tech support has run out. I mean, it's ran out. I only had it on for 2 weeks. Anyway, long story short, I decided to forget it. And I downloaded the Quebec hand that wrote that software, for the KX3, for K3 software. Works great, integrated quickly into to the rig. I downloaded the AC log, and that integrates in nicely. And to Logbook of the World, it was just a click, and it was done. Couldn't believe it. Oh, but you know what? Everybody's
different. I have mine completely automated. I just click a button. It Logbook of the World, EQSL. It does everything. You got to play around with it. Yes, getting Logbook of the World to work with that was a pain in the ass.
Yeah, HRD and Logbook of the World do not play nice.
It works, but it just Logbook of the World is a pain in the ass to use. Yeah. It is a pain in the ass.
Once you got it going,
yeah.
Oh, it's great.
But I just wanted to show you guys I've been working on FT0. Here you go. This is FT0. This is my shack. So in my shack right now, I'm running FT0.
With all steel.
This was a picture as of 3 days ago.
Oh, you're building a Faraday cage.
Yeah, it's a Faraday cage. But this room here, this is going to be my shack.
Or it's an 8-foot antenna array.
Yeah, basically, I got a nice ground plane here.
Oh, a big loop.
But anyway, that's what I'm up to these days. I don't even have a shack.
Make sure you put insulation in the walls and the ceiling.
Why?
Because you won't hear anybody else in the house, and more importantly, they won't hear you, and you won't be disturbing them.
I want my wife to hear me.
What? She doesn't want to hear. She wants. Oh, never mind. My last shack in Toronto, it was all insulated. It was great. They didn't bother me, and I didn't bother them. This shack here is not insulated, and you can hear everything everywhere.
The nice thing is, right above this is the front door. It's got a powder room and a laundry room. So there's nothing above here.
Powder room? What's a powder room in a shack?
Powder room. The half bath.
Powder room.
Yeah, they call it a powder room.
What kind of a man cave is that?
It's like a half bath.
When you move it, what's the date that your shack will be up and running?
They claim it's going to be by the first week of November. Well, not up and running, but I'll be able to move equipment in first week of November.
Okay, December 24th.
Yeah, that's about right.
You really get your life reprioritized again. Anyway.
Right now, all my gear is in boxes in the garage. Everything. I moved this weekend. I moved my entire shack. So it's
starting to sound like Eric's shack. I mean, Eric is actually ahead of you. He's unpacking his boxes.
Hey, at least I've identified a shack. Eric has got stuff in boxes, but he doesn't have physically a shack.
No, he did, but it was outside. I think he's had to move it inside now, though.
Yeah, he's been identifying a shack for years.
Anyway, careful, he might be still listening. Anyway, well, Okay, what else? Anybody else got any comments about anything?
A quick comment. If
Al,
anyone,
you've been pretty quiet tonight.
all right, quick comment. If anyone wants to buy an SDR, the Pluto SDR is reasonably priced and it's pretty good. And it can be software unlocked to double the frequency range. It advertises 3 gigahertz, but you can unlock it to 6 gigahertz. It's just I don't know why they disabled it, but I would look into that if anybody's interested. The Beta RF is a bit overpriced, but the Pluto SDR is the same chip on the inside.
And while I think of it, you just kind of reminded me there with, especially for, and I don't know about your board, but Kevin, with your Hack RF, I've been lucky because I haven't been paying too much attention, but one of the guys here turns out you can easily blow the preamp that's in the Hack RF. I can't remember the sequence of events that you can do that would cause it, but I believe it has something to do with changing the antenna while it's still powered up. And if you blow the preamp that's in the Hack RF, that's a mighty, mighty small chip to get out. And the fix, some guys have replaced it, and some guys haven't bothered. They've just bought an outboard preamp to take its place.
Yeah, I saw that when you guys were going through it, and I got to run 7-3. Okay, Dave's leaving. Bye, Dave.
See you, Dave.
Adios.
I saw that, and so what I do is on all these SDRs, like I've got another little handheld Spectrum thing. I'll always put a dummy load on them. I just leave a dummy load on them unless I'm doing something with them specifically, and then I change it to whatever I'm going to do, like a receiving antenna or a little whip antenna or a scope load or whatever. But I just have a point of leaving a dummy load on them.
Okay.
So because even if you key up an HT right beside it, that's probably more than enough energy to damage it.
Well, actually, in this case, it wasn't that. It was so much how Phil blew his was just changing the antenna.
Yeah, and even so that maybe a static,
And I'm thinking, shit, that's why I do that all the time. But anyway, he bought a bunch of chips from eBay, I think it was, or I'm not sure where. So it was going to be a challenge that I was going to take on to replace it. But if you blow yours, I know where there's a spare chip.
All right. Well, that's good to know.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, queries, comments, whatever? No? Oh, that's great. Okay.
No,
All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming out tonight and participating. Great to see you all again. And I guess we'll see. I didn't write the date down there, but I guess our next meeting will be in 2 weeks. The regular meeting, homebrew meeting I'm referring to again. And hopefully we'll see you all out then.
Yep, the
Thanks,
21st.
Peter.
Take care. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night, everyone.
Night, everybody.
Eric, you there? You can shut her down.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to